Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of X-Men 97, Episode 6, Lifedeath Part 2. This was directed by Chase Connolly and was written by Charlie Feldman. This is the first episode that does not have Bo DiMeo writing on it, which is interesting. Now, the Marvel animation, there's only one kick drum playing here in the background. It's just like, dung, dung. I don't know what that was about, but that was all we got there. I was trying to figure it out as the episode on. Maybe it was alluding to something, but let me know if you caught anything with that. Now, it's always fascinating to watch the X-Men intro for this show. There's always little surprises there and things they add and remove. And there's no Magneto here to start. So that was crazy because he's opened each one. And then Nightcrawler is here. So that was cool because it's confirming he is now an X-Men. So I like that. And you get in the flashbacks we get from the original show, we see a lot of Nimrod here and we see a lot of Charles and Lilandra moments, kind of setting up we're going to see them a lot in this episode. Now, what is interesting though is that they titled this episode Life Death Part 2, but with Life Death Part 1 they put Motendo on the other half. This really was the same thing going on where it was a two-parter, so it was strange they didn't give the side with the Shi'ar a title here. So I am, though, going to break my review into two parts in that case. I'm going to start with everything going on with Life Death here, and then I'm going to finish off this review with Shi'ar. Now, remember, Forge was bit by the adversary, and it's amazing how well Alison Sealy-Smith not only does the voice of Storm, we know that, but how she's doing the adversary as well and does a great job of it. But the adversary is trying to pit Storm against Forge, reminding her of his betrayal, and because remember, she had learned that he had made the blueprint for the mutant collars. What I like what they did about this story is that they set a timer for it to keep it moving because she had to save Forge before that venom hit his heart or he was toast. And that's where Storm, we know Storm and love her for her honor, and she says all lives deserve saving, even his. So she's able to put aside that anger at him for a moment. Now, the adversary leans into Storm's fears. They feed off the fears that are already there with Storm, but heightens them. And she leans into her not being an X-Men anymore and saying it got her nowhere, which is going to give you kind of clues to Storm's mindset and the lie she's told herself, which we're going to get to. But the adversary puts Storm in a coffin. This is Storm's worst fear. I mean, this goes way back to the original show, the comics, her origin story about her being claustrophobic. So I'm happy they were finally showing that in X-Men 97. We hadn't seen that yet. And my favorite line of the episode comes where Storm says, "I do not fear death." And the adversary says, "I know. That's why you rush to play death. You fear living." Woo, great writing there. And the adversary says, "As you said to Jean, I wonder what it'd like to be human is a tempting daydream." So this is leaning more and more to that theme then about Storm actually rejecting her powers. Now, it was a really cool visual of the adversary turning into the demonic versions of the X-Men. That was sick. And we get this reveal now that Storm, not actually really totally suppressed of her powers, that she was turning her back on them. Now, it was a nice moment for Forge. You're kind of waiting for him to have his big moment. We get to see him as Sorcerer Forge here, using the magic, looking like Doctor Strange. Really cool. His mom practiced desert magic, so she had this book. And this book would also tell them that they need a cacti called the Midnight Chala to save him that is in the nearby caves. Now, he went with Storm, we learned, because he knows she has this fear of tight spaces, and he knows this cacti is going to be in a tight space. They also clarify in this moment when they get to the caves that the adversary feeds on fear and self-loathing, so it's the perfect case having Forge and Storm to be the ones that would draw the adversary in. But the important line with Storm here is she says to Forge, "No matter how many I saved, my mutant gifts inspire twice as much hate and humanity. In a way, your machine failing is a blessing. I am better this way." This is the lie. This is the lie that the adversary is going to talk about with Storm, that she lies to herself, telling herself that her powers cause more harm than good. And when Storm goes into this cave to get the cacti because Forge is too weak, the adversary is back and is really feeding on Storm's claustrophobia now. But the truth is revealed to the audience that more than just the executioner's blast that suppressed Storm's power and that serum, it's actually her just accepting it, her denial that, no, she can bring her powers back, she can break through that, but she didn't really want to by this lie that thinking she is more hurting people with her powers than helping. But she will break through that lie and realize that is what it is, a lie. It's not the truth, that she is needed, and Storm is unleashed here. I love the Newton brothers playing that piano again. We saw in episode 1 with her. It's like becoming Storm's theme, which I really like. And the music just throughout this whole scene was excellent. And then we see Storm in her original comic outfit with the long hair too. Absolutely incredible moment. Storm being my favorite mutant. I was just blown away by this. I love her in that outfit. And I love the little moment they had her looking at the reflection of herself in the water. That was a nice touch as well. And I like they wrap this up here with her talking about the blessing of demons to Forge, saying that the adversary finally basically healed her adversary by embracing it. And they heal Forge with this medicine. And like these stories always go, things seem happy for a moment for Storm and Forge. And there's Trish Tilby on the TV catching her up on what happened with Genosha. So this is leading up to, I predicted that Storm in some way is going to obviously help get back the X-Men who died. Now, I really loved what went on here with Lifedeath in this episode. I really don't have any problems with it. I thought it was great. I maybe wish they just did the whole episode Lifedeath instead of putting it into 2 parts, but I feel like they just didn't think they had enough of Motendo to do a full episode or this story in the Shi'ar area, and that is why they split it. It just kind of stinks that Lifedeath had to suffer because of that, but I still really enjoyed it. So let's go into that Shi'ar story. So we see the Shi'ar in the middle of this battle versus the Kree, and Deathbird, who's always causing trouble, comes in and attacks Ronan, who we see, which I'm surprised to see, and we get this little Imperial Guard Kree showdown, and Gladiator has some great moments throughout this episode in action, and Deathbird wants to know where the Supreme Intelligence has fled. So she didn't actually get the Supreme Intelligence yet, but this is interrupted by a message from her sister Lilandra, so it's great to see Lilandra again, and she really catches us up as she's catching up this whole Empire, saying, 1 year ago we offered the skills of our mighty healers to a Terran man on the verge of death, Professor X himself. And it was great how they showed him first through his body shots in this new armor, so confirming he's alive, which obviously you figured when he was going with Lilandra at the end of the original show that she was gonna keep him alive somehow. And she announces she will marry Charles, making him the new emperor, and the High Council is not thrilled about this. It looks like the council from Star Wars, and Deathbird's not thrilled either. Now, there's a lot of great dialogue between Lilandra and Charles, kind of calling each other out, and I love Lilandra says to Charles at one point, "My emperor has much to learn about masking his manipulation." So true about Professor X. And she's calling him out about wanting, deep down for him, he wants to return to Earth and see his X-Men. But Lilandra calls that situation, going back to Earth, a black hole, an endless spiraling vacuum of dramas. But that is where Professor X tops her and says, "Didn't your brother nearly destroy the universe with the Mcron crystal?" So totally got her there. Now, you start to feel for Lilandra because she's telling Charles, you earned a life of your own and I need you. And she's like, once we crush the Kree, and educators such as you can teach them our ways. Now, we'll see by the end of the episode, he ditches her really at the end of the day for the X-Men. Charles is a very complicated character, but it was cool to see his legs and how he's standing through this exoskeleton armor. And she has a great line, "All ruling is make-believe," and she says, "I pretend to be perfect as my subjects would never love the woman beneath the armor like Charles does." But Charles gets out of her, he's like, "Look, will you at least consider Earth?" And she's like, "Yes. But virtue of a teacher is showing their students how to walk on their own." And he says, "True, but only if he is sure there are no more lessons he can teach them." So it makes you wonder, should Charles have let this all go? You know, should he have really kept his promises to Lilandra and helped her there and stayed with her and not proved Deathbird right, as she'll say later in the episode, by him leaving to help the X-Men? But at the end of the day, that is his family, the X-Men too, and that is serious tragedy that happened on Genosha. I just don't think he can deny that. So I see both angles here in his choice, and that there's really just pros and cons of both choices. It's not black and white. Now, Deathbird's just really not about the Terrain people. She's like, your consort was born on the wrong side of the stars. And she has a great line. Xavier would see his Milky Way ghetto become our own new throne world. Where did she get that line? That was great. But she brings up this test she wants him to take. Of course, there's some rule book thing that she brings up, and of course Charles would know it because he's of course read the rule book. But it's a test that requires a non-Shi'ar to pass a test of loyalty in order to wed a royal. And Deathbird wants him to renounce Earth and erase all memory of your life there, and wants Lilandra to do the scrubbing. So she's really pushing it here. She's asking for a lot, and they know it. Now, an interesting scene before we even see that trial happen is the Gladiator is looking at this statue, very few that they have in the Shi'ar world. They don't really believe in art like X says, but it's basically showing you if these cultures just united as one and kind of forgot about what they originally were, but that's not what X believes in. He's saying, what is united if one half must be erased for the sake of the whole? And he reflects on Magneto because Magneto thinks like Gladiator here and sees it as erasing one side and becoming one, but that's not how X thinks. He thinks you preserve your culture and join in coexisting that way. But Lilandra brings up to X, like, why remember? Why remember trying to make peace and being rejected on Earth? And she's like, you can start anew here. And if he refuses, they're not going to let them be together. And she can't just resign because she's like, then Deathbird's going to roll. And we don't want that. And Xavier realizes, like, yeah, you saved my life. I owe you that devotion that you gave me. So it makes you a little more angry at X's decision at the end of this episode. And you see the ritual there, too. He's already stumbling when they bring up the X-Men, renouncing the X-Men part. He doesn't like it. Can't do it. This is where Deathbird's like, he sees to ally with us on Earth. And I love his line, my God, you are dramatic, talking about Deathbird. That was great. And then you see that racism start to hit where they're even calling him out now being a mutant, and some of these Shi'ar are grossed by it. And then Deathbird goes so far to say Lilandra has gone as mad as their brother did. And that's when all hell breaks loose. And she attacks Lilandra, and then Gladiator fights back. He has a great moment knocking Deathbird back, protecting Lilandra. And of course, Deathbird does a dirty move and goes for Professor X's legs. But that's where X is like, I've forgotten my greatest gift. So it was a nice moment to lead up to that, where he wouldn't be able to move, but he'd able to go back to his gifts that we know from the Professor X who couldn't move. And he goes, hear me, class is now in session. So I really love this, that he literally brought the Shi'ar into this astral plane classroom. And I love how he throws the apple in Deathbird's face at one point. And he shows the hypocrisy of the Shi'ar history. And he calls it a snake oil racket. But one of the Shi'ar will bring up that even on Earth they believe might is right. And he says, the rhyme that sells the lie, that we must pillage worth from one another, that for me to be more, you must be less. And Xavier says, why? Says who? Who made up these silly rules? Great writing for Professor X there, and a great message for people watching. And it holds up today, these kind of lessons. But this is where the astral plane will be interrupted, and he's shown this scary vision of what happened on Genosha. He sees this giant Gambit who turns into a skeleton. Everyone in that classroom turns into a skeleton in front of him. And he's like, oh my God, my children of the atom destroyed. So he tells Lilandra, I must return to Earth immediately. And he's like, while I cowered in the cosmos, the unthinkable has happened. But this is where Lilandra's like, hey, like if you leave, you're going to prove my sister right here. He's like, I will not abandon my kind. It is time I return to my X-Men. So he's willing to let that happen. So, you know, it's a great choice here. I don't know how I feel about it, but I could see why Lilandra is going to be really kind of betrayed by this. But I could see also, you know, X has got to go help his kids here. So he's coming back, which is really exciting to see now. They leave the Software Storm and Professor X are ready to come back and help and be X-Men. Now, we get what is like a post-credit scene, which is Bolivar Trask is running away from someone. And we see it's Sinister. He is still around. We learn that Trask gave his DNA to Sinister to access Master Mold. And that Sinister is really the one behind this attack on Genosha. And he's got this evil laugh. So we're going to see more Sinister here. He's the mastermind behind this all right now. So that leaves a cliffhanger for next episode and what's going to happen here. So I do believe that with Professor X in the fold and Storm and Forge, and then you still have Cable out there, Forge will get in contact with Cable, and there's going to be some kind of mission to go back in time and fix what happened on Genosha and save Magneto and Gambit and other mutants alike. So I really thought this was another strong episode. I'm going to give it a 9.2 because it was really good writing here. It was really exciting to see Lilandra again. I really love Lilandra. I like what goes on with the Shi'ar stuff, and I'm glad they didn't ditch that in this show. And it was nice to get a catch-up of Professor X and what's going on with him and that he's still alive, and to see him in that new uniform was pretty damn cool. And I really like everything that was going on with Storm's story. More great writing. And like I'd pointed out, and how there was that great line about her fearing living and then facing that lie she's telling herself where her powers are causing more harm than good, and getting her powers back and seeing that awesome classic costume again. So really good episode again. This show just keeps knocking it out of the park. Let me know what you thought down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so I can get more support for this X-Men channel. It really means so much. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, so that will help me get monetized. So I really appreciate that. And please check out all the interviews I've done with the cast as well. And I'll see you next time.